Hi everyone, we're back and we're going to use Adobe Illustrator to design type-like artwork. Maybe you want to create an artistic logo where letters turn into flowers or animals or objects, or maybe you just want to connect letters or extend the Y on the end of a word. Anywhere that visual branding happens, these skills will get you creative. This is the logo we're going to create for a fictitious toy company just to learn the tools. Let's open Adobe Illustrator and create a new letter-sized document, or open your old file from the last tutorial. Now let's type the word international in all capital letters in the default font. Don't drag out a text box, just type the word. And we're going to resize it so it's nice and large. Remember to hold down the Shift key before you drag it so you can constrain proportions. Now let's give it some loose tracking by adding space between those letters. Highlight the word. Then remember, we're going to hold down the Option key if you're on a Mac, or the Alt key if you're on a PC. And on the right side of your keyboard, you're going to locate those arrow keys and click the right arrow key to loosen the tracking. And there we go. We can see the word getting wider with that space. Okay, that's pretty good. So now in a different area of the page, we want to type the word trains and tightly kern it. So first click on the selection tool and then back to the type tool so that the cursor can start a new word in a different place. And now we can move around both words independently on the artboard. And we're going to kern the word train. So go ahead and click in the first two letters, the T and the R, hold down the Option key, and then on the right side of your keyboard, you're going to tap that left arrow key to tighten the kerning. And we can see those letters come together. And now we're going to do that between all the letters so that they're nice and tightly kerned. And now we're prepared to do some serious artwork. Let's save that file and call it logo_trains.ai, and we are ready to move on. Let's focus on the word trains. So move the other word out of the way, and we need to turn this word trains into artwork so that we can edit the anchor points and paths in Illustrator. To do this, go ahead and select the word and go to the top menu to Type and Create Outlines. Boom! The word looks the same, but once you do this, it's no longer editable with the text tool. It has become artwork. See, I clicked on the text tool, but the cursor won't go in there. That's because it can't be manipulated with the text tool anymore. Now let's zoom into this word to work on some details. In your toolbox, click on the Direct Select tool, which is the second tool down. And before we do anything, and this is important, click away from your type. Drop the cursor and step back from the type. Okay, now you can click back on your word, but you're going to click in a specific place. Click in the black area of one of your characters in the center, away from the edges. You can now drag this character up or down or any which way you want, and it's going to move independently of the other characters. That's one way to use the Direct Select tool now. You can also use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move your characters up and down and around. Either way. Okay, now we're going to do something else with our Direct Select tool, and I need you to click away from your word again, somewhere out in the white area. This time, go back to your word and click on the edge of a character, like the edge of this letter T. See how that activates the points and paths of the letter forms? Now they are editable as artwork. So click and drag the bar of the T across the top of the word. Pretty cool, right? If you already know how to use the pen tool, anchor points, and paths, then you can go off on your own making artwork out of this word any which way you want to go. If you haven't used those tools in a while, that's okay because we're going to work on them now. And I've linked to a pen tool refresher video in the description below in case you need it. Now, let's click a point at the top of the S and drag it out. And another point. And you can see we can just drag anything we like. If you want to click on a curve, we can drag out that curve, etc. If we want to marquee an area, so in other words, drag through an area with our direct select tool, we can stretch it out. Feel free to stop this video at any time to play and practice before moving on. But right now, we're going to add and subtract some anchor points so that we have more creative possibilities. So let's do that. First, click away from our word and click back on the edge of a letter form to activate the path. I'm going to click on the top of the T here. Now, select your pen tool and click on that top of the T where we had just activated it. When we click, the pen tool is going to add an anchor point there, and now we're going to go back to our direct select tool to grab that anchor point. We move it up, we can pull it up. By default, of course, it's a corner point, but we can convert it into a curve by clicking the menu above and turning it into a nice round curve. Now we've played around a little bit to see how it works. We're going to do some serious artwork. All right, I'm going to undo all these silly things using Edit Undo or Command Z or Control Z, depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC. And we're going to go back to the point where we converted the word to outlines so that we can now do some serious design. In a logo, as you know, letters should appear as though they were designed to fit or flow together. So let's zoom in to the word trains, and we're going to focus on the R and the A. Notice that the tips of the letters appear to be randomly disjointed in relationship to one another, and that's not a good look for a logo. So maybe we can align or even connect these. So with your direct select tool already selected, start by clicking the tip of the A and moving it up to meet the R. Now let's click the bottom anchor point of the R and move it up to meet the A. We'll just need to adjust the handles and curves a little bit as well on both the letters to shift the shapes. And we're going to need to work out some lumps along the way. This is not a perfect process. It is art. So it's also nice to know that you can click on an anchor point and move it with your arrow keys, like this. And if you want your arrow keys to move in smaller increments now, which I do, just go to Edit and Preferences and General. And change the size of the increments to 0.25. That's going to move anything just a quarter of a pixel instead of a whole pixel at a time. So we can move in tiny little increments and perfect our design. Now back to work. This editing will take a little bit of time. We move the curve of the A up and get rid of some of the lumps here. You kind of have to eyeball it. Okay, that looks good enough for now. Let's zoom back so we can see our design taking shape. These flowing curves might not be as appropriate for a toy train company as other design ideas, but we're just having fun learning the tools. Okay, it's time to connect the R and the A so they can move in a single unit. Select the two characters together by using your direct select tool to drag through the area that we want to merge. Next, go to Windows and Pathfinder. That's going to pop open your Pathfinder palette that will do things like combine paths, cut out paths. We're going to click the third button on the bottom row, which is the merge button, and it's going to merge these shapes. So now our direct select tool can, when we click away and we click into the center of these, we can actually move them as one piece of artwork. So now let's take a look at the I. We're going to make it shorter so we have a flat space across the top of the word to run our T across. First, we're going to click away from the word and then click back into the center of the I to drag the whole thing down so that the dot at the top of the I is flush with the tops of the other letters. So now we're going to shorten the I. To do that, we click away from the word again and then click back on the edge of the I at the bottom. And we just pull up and shorten it. So notice the reason we're clicking away a lot is because the direct select tool is really being used as two different tools in a way. It's being used to move letters, but it's also being used to change the edges of letters. So to go back and forth, we just have to click away. So let's drag that T out across the top of the word. And what if we wanted to make the top of the T thicker so we can put some abstract train tracks on it? Let's do that. I'm dragging the top of the T up, and now I'm going to create a white box on top of the black area to create the appearance of space between the tracks. There's just one thing we need to do now. We don't want that white box on top to be a separate element to the logo. We need to unify it. If we let it sit this way, we could have trouble using the logo artwork or putting it on various backgrounds. I'll show you what I mean by creating another layer and putting a colored background behind it. That might look cool, actually. We might want to keep that line white. And if so, you can keep it by going to the Pathfinder palette. You could just marquee all of those elements together and then click the merge button. So that would remain white. However, if you want to cut out that white shape on top, you're going to marquee the whole area just like you would before, but you're going to click the minus front button. Some interesting names for these buttons. And that's going to cut out anything that you have laid on top of something if you select them together. And there we have it. So we're almost done. It's time to finish this logo by moving the word international up under the first word. And we can either let it hang off the end or we can make it align with the word trains. If we want to make it aligned, we have some choices, but we can also make the word smaller as well. So let's do that. We'll take the selection tool and remember to hold down the shift key before dragging the word smaller. Awesome! Okay, now we have a unified logo. And as you know, logo elements should fit together purposefully, almost like puzzle pieces, and this one does. So let's see what other logo requirements it meets. Well, it's simple, it's legible, and we would be able to produce it in black and white because it is black and white at the moment. The only concern I might have is that logos have to be legible when they're tiny. 1/4 of an inch high. And that's because sometimes they appear on things like ticket stubs for sponsorships and all kinds of tiny little places. So a logo won't be reducible if one of your elements is dramatically smaller than the rest, because it'll just get too tiny when everything is reduced. And we're losing some visibility of the word international, but the word trains is highly branded and it's highly legible. The last step of the logo is to turn all of our type into outlines so that people don't need the fonts for the artwork. We'll select the word international and go to type and create outlines. This can serve as your original artwork. Now we're ready to export the artwork in other formats and use it. To do this, one last step, we need to crop the artboard tightly around the logo so it can be used without all this space around it. So, select the artboard tool located right here. You'll see that the edges of the artboard have now been activated so that we can pull them in around our logo. And save. Command S or Control S. And we should be doing that throughout. Now we can export our logo any way we want. For example, as a ping, with or without transparency, as an SVG. Technically, we would resize it first so the file isn't bigger than it needs to be, but we're just going to do a quick export. Now that you've learned how to work with type as artwork in Adobe Illustrator, you're ready to experiment with your own creations. Have fun and make magic.